The sun set shortly after we ate, and the raging storm far overhead dropped the temperature fast. We all huddled up inside the remains of the service station and looked up pairs of old toasters to spark batteries to keep warm. There was no way we could continue tonight through bedwetting, and 42 wasn't expecting us until tomorrow at the earliest anyway, so we had to sit and bide our time. Longbow slept as much as she could in the night, but I didn't want to. I planned to use this night to enjoy holding her. For some reason, the others had given Longbow and I the privilege of staying in the bathroom, and our own toaster to keep us warm. It wasn't a large room, and it wasn't comfortable, but it was separate. I'm sure they wanted us to sleep well in there, but Twain kept suggesting that we use it for something else entirely. Though the thought had crossed my mind, I had a far different idea of how to spend the time. They say that an hour with a pretty mare seems like a minute, and then a minute with your hoof on a hot stove feels like an hour. I took this to its logical extreme with an idea that wasn't my brightest moment, but seemed to work. I sat with Longbow in my hooves, and every time my thoughts would begin to drift, I would forget to hold up my rear leg, and it would slowly lower and touch the side of the heated toaster. I flinched every time it happened, and would quickly lift my leg up to refocus myself on the mare I loved. Her mane wafted slowly across her muzzle as she slept, and she made the most adorable squeaks every time I adjusted my hooves around her. Why did I have to find a mare like her at this point in my life? She deserved more than I could ever give, but even if I were a king, that would still be true. I shut my eyes and ignored the world around this room for a moment, imagining how maybe one day soon we could go back to Friendship City and use their chapel. Another day we'd be back at Tenpony for Dr. Fitz to give us the news on whether we'd have a colt or filly. Maybe even another day I'd get a hold of my wife as we watched our young one take their first steps, or say their first words. When that day comes, I want bacon. Yum. Longbow muttered in her sleep, ripping me from the daydream as she licked her lips. The strong smell of burning flesh was coupled with pain in my rear leg as I yanked it away from the heat and sat myself up quickly. I whined softly, the coat on my leg now looking as black as the left half of my body. Longbow stirred awake and looked at me groggily. "You alright, Backlash?" I smiled and flopped back down as quickly as I could, not wanting to worry her. "Perfectly fine. How did you sleep?" She let out a groan and turned herself over, pressing herself back against me. The back of my leg ebbed in pain, but it did help to slow time down. It helped me enjoy every second that I had with her. "Go back to bed, hon. We've still got some time to rest." I glanced at the clock in my vision, doing a double take as it read it was now 6 a.m. Had I really spent all night just enjoying her company? She sat back up and looked over at me, frowning for a moment. "Dear, you look exhausted. Was it nightmares again?" She rubbed at her eyes and let out a soft yawn. "Go back to sleep. The others will get us when we're ready." She lay back down and stretched her hooves out, nudging herself softly into me as I lay down with her. She was my one weakness, and I just couldn't push myself to tell her no anymore. I want to stay with her forever. As I let out a yawn and wiggled myself close to her, it felt like maybe I'd got lucky enough that it would stay this way. I closed my eye and nuzzled into her neck, thinking that in just another minute I'd pick my leg up and start the process all over again. A heavy knocking at the door startled me awake, and my eyes shot wide open. I had fallen asleep at some point, but as I stretched, my rear leg reminded me that I probably shouldn't have fallen asleep next to the scalding metal again. "Backlash! Longbow! Get out here! Now!" Carlotta was angry this morning, and I had no idea why. I let out a deep yawn as Longbow pulled her head up from the floor, chewing on a few strands of her mane as they sat in her muzzle. My gaze drifted to the clock in my pitbuck vision, and I noticed that it was noon? The fuck? I jumped to my hooves and immediately regret the decision, as the crispy section of my rear leg reminded me that this had indeed been one of my dumber ideas. Longbow jumped to her hooves as well, her magic twisting the deadbolts open and pulling the door out of the way. Carlotta moved aside as we poured out to find an empty room. Not a single pony of the resistance was there. Where the fuck did they go? Where's Sky? Sky's on the other head of you two lovebirds, so you can get your beauty sleep. We'll meet up with them just outside of Red Wing, and walk from there. That way, the car is close by if we need it at some point, so I guess that makes up for having to walk the rest of the way through the snow. She crossed her talons angrily. That was a relief. They hadn't abandoned us. But it still doesn't leave much leeway time to get there before the deadline if the Marauder went as slow as it did yesterday. It also didn't explain where Skyline had run off to. She and that asshole you hired are outside, keeping Longbow's unappreciative friends away. I blinked as I wasn't sure what she meant. What? Friends? Longbow pushed her mane from her face and twisted her ears to listen for anything. Before the gears in my head could even spin up, Longbow figured it out and charged the front door with her magic, nearly tearing it from its rusted hinges. Instinctively, my hooves carried me forward after her, and once outside I could see the three bright familiar faces in shining silver armor. Fruit Cup, Frosted Cakes, and Maple stood out next to the near-dead bonfire, the three of them smiling at us brightly as Sky and Twain kept their guns on them. Well, I should correct that it was 3 smiles until Longbow hit Maple. She clobbered him across the muzzle with a fantastic left hook that sent him sprawling to the snow. Fruit Cup quickly jumped over and pulled Longbow back, while Frosty helped Maple to his hooves. Maple rubbed his chin with a look of acceptance in his eyes. I probably deserved that, seeing as you were right about Strudel. You've deserved that before I was right about her. You want to see what I think you deserve for after? She struggled against Fruit Cup's hold and calmed herself when I came up and put a hoof on her shoulder. The hell are you doing here, Maple? I meant what I said. You were right. He let out a sigh. The idea of explaining why he was wrong about something sounded like it baffled him, but there was honesty in his words. She put the base in lockdown and kept us confined to quarters, refusing to let us serve as defenders where we could do the most good. That's when I knew you were right. So a plan was formulated, and then I broke out with Fruit and Frosty. Getting your whole squad court-martialed because you suddenly want to play the hero? How the fuck did you even get out of Condition 1 lockdown? Longbow finally shook Fruit Cup's hold. The stallion, who she had once called her best friend, shyly took his place next to Maple and kept his gaze to the snow. Your mother had the answer to both of those. He smirked and ran his hoof through his mane. She kicked some well-deserved sense into me during debriefing, and overrode the lockdown when she caught us trying to escape. My mother? Longbow trembled with rage, as I could see her tense every muscle in an attempt not to murder him. You moron! They'll hang her for treason! She snapped, but I acted just a half-second faster and wrapped my forehooves around her to pull her close. She grunted and flailed her legs at Maple, giving up faster this time. Maple looked at his hoof boredly again, letting the arrogant side of him show. You forget, I worked for the mayor. The Elder can't touch her, as only she knows the other half of the codes needed to make the Nautilus weapons system work. The worst they'll do is put her under house arrest until they can see how all this ends up. I had to wonder if he changed at all, or just wanted a chance to flaunt how heroic he could be to us. Sure, blame me, but first ask yourself this. What protection does Fruit Cup have? What do you think the punishment will be for him? That's on your head, asshole! You started this shit! Longbow growled at him, tensing her legs to swing again before Fruit Cup stepped up to her. It was my plan, Longbow. His words were soft, and I could tell how much he cared for her when he said it. After you were transferred, it felt like there was a giant hole in my life. We had always been best friends, and then you were just gone. When you came back, I was happy to have you back in my life. I just couldn't stand losing you again, so I had to break out. Maple asked if he could come along, knowing full well we'd all be labeled deserters and hung. He gave up everything, just to help me see you again. But you didn't have to do this for me. Longbow sat as I released my grasp and took a step back. She was running everything through her head, trying to make sense of it all when something must have clicked into place. She dove forward and wrapped her hooves around Fruit Cup, who simply just pat her back and smiled. Longbow gave him a small kiss on the cheek and just spoke softly. Just thank you for being here for me. Well, I hate to break this up, but we're going to be late if we don't get going. Carlotta's annoyed voice chimed in as she trudged through the snow past us. But hey, the less dead weight we have might just add us a little bit more traction. Has any pony ever told you how lovely you are, Carlotta? Mabel smiled and gave a quick glance to Frosted Cakes, giving her a small nod of approval, which sent her rifling through her saddlebags. Oh, and while we're at it, do we have a plan, or are we just going to go in guns blazing? Frosty ended up turning the saddlebags over and dumping out the contents, which amounted to a set of power armor. The 4 hours of driving was uneventful, but overall not unpleasant, even with the cold around us. The inside of the Marauder was a much warmer atmosphere to boot, as we passed the time exchanging stories of hilarious exploits and recalled embarrassing moments of the ones we loved. The best part of it all was that Longbow was by my side for it. She looked more relaxed now that she was in her armor again, even if it didn't mean that she was accepted back into her own family. She was part of ours, and if it was still something that brought a smile to her muzzle, it made me smile. Skyline went leaning up against Carlotta, who mostly stayed quiet, but I could tell that she loved to listen to the stories that I told about Sky. By the way the plumage around her eyes would brighten, she hadn't heard some of the more embarrassing ones. Oh, Backlash! I know that we've already modded the Marauder for you once, but Fruit and I had this idea for another upgrade. Frosty hooked her legs around the front seat and pulled herself closer from the back. Get this. Hover conversion. That was different. A what? Conversion? Fruitcup leaned his head forward with a proud grin. Well, you see, if we could get the levitation talismans of a Skycar to work at the spark voltage of the Marauder's engine, while also increasing their output to draw ratio, in theory you could make it hover for most obstacles. No more worrying about mud, crater-filled roads, or unfriendly folk getting in your way. You could just skim over all of it without losing speed. And you really think that would work? I scrunched my muzzle as an odd thought hit me. Skyline might be alright with riding in it then. She always said she'd rather have a Skycar. The excited nod I got from Fruitcup forced a smile across my face. Well, as long as it can convert back to a car if needed, I'll be fine with giving it a shot. Fruit, I've been meaning to ask. Longbow scooted herself around and looked at Fruitcup's leg. How's that prosthetic working for you? Oh, it's amazing. He torqued his leg and the power armor hissed, sliding away in Longbow's magic to reveal a skeletal robot limb. Though I wanted to look at it in greater detail, I had to look away to make sure we weren't careening towards a tree, and in that time Longbow retracted the armored hoof and I missed my chance. It took a few hours to get used to, but the suspension on it makes it smooth as silk. The torque buffers are amazingly quiet for their size, and efficient to boot. It's got tons of room for upgrades, and little tweaks that I can do. Fruit? Frosty's voice came across as annoyed. Love, you're boring them. Wait, you two? Longbow let out a gasp and put her hooves over her muzzle, covering the bright smile she wore. Fruit, why didn't you tell me? He blushed. I'd hoped it was obvious that we'd been together for a few months. I mean, we're two of a kind. He put his hoof around Frosty and pulled her close. Though Maple isn't quite sure if it's a good idea. Says it might get in the way of unit cohesion. He scoffed at that notion. Buck him. I love her. Twain pushed the two lovebirds apart and pointed at a small opening in the snow-covered rocks ahead. That's where we're supposed to meet. Pull over. I leaned a turn towards the small cave entrance, pulling up beside it and shutting the car off as I looked at it. After a minute or so with no movement, Railspike peeked his head out with a smile. Oh, the others were starting to think you'd slept in. He nervously waved a fruit cup and frosted cakes. Guess you were waiting for more friends. Yeah, They're buddies of mine. I grunted and pulled myself out of the Marauder, actually making out of the car without slipping out the windsill this time. The gears in my head kicked up, and I glanced at the rusty shotgun Railspike had on his saddle. I remembered that we were going into the thick of it soon. Before I forget, I lifted my pip-buck and bit down on the fuses, swapping them out so I could use both SATs and the inventory functions. As I did, Railspike trotted out of the cave entrance and stood next to me. "Your group ready?" He looked back and waited for a moment, gazing into the darkness before turning back and nodding. "Double-check all your gear, because we only get one try at this, if at all." We went through our bags of supplies we brought, taking what we could use from the ammo sack first. Next, for the weapons, Carlotta found an old high-caliber service rifle to attach to her saddle, before distributing the remaining guns to the resistance fighters who needed them. Since there was little time for cooking, the food that could be eaten without preparation was spread around, which meant that my box of fancy cakes was expended fairly quickly. All in all, we still had some troubling news. All the .308 rounds were split between Carlotta and Longbow, leaving both of them with not nearly enough to be comfortable. And there weren't any Gauss rounds to be found. The few Skye had and the 2 in Longbow's pistols were all we had. And we were going to need to make those shots count. Add this to we still don't have a medical supplies to our name, past the dash in my bags, but we were as ready as we were ever going to get. In the few minutes it took us to get moving, the sun started to set and the sky was darkening quickly. We left the Marauder behind and told Maple to hang back until the fighting started. Once it had, they would join and make our way to us, to help clear the ponies we encountered. With all this sorted, we walked across the snowy hills for another few minutes until the thick smell of burning wood filled my nose. I pushed myself to crest the largest hill before us, and from top I could see a ruined Redwing sitting before me. The open field of battle that spread up to the gate was strewn with all manner of frozen corpses. Hundreds lay just about on each side of the city, each pony growing more twisted and mutilated the closer to the wall you looked. Almost all the mountain city was burnt, or is still actively burning to the ground, and even from this far I can see the bodies from both sides lining the frozen streets. There wasn't a single part of town that looked like it had been spared from the fighting, and I had grown a pit in my stomach from the thought that no pony could have lived through such a violent assault. A loud bell rang from inside the town as we made our way down the hill. The scampering shapes of 42's minions crisscrossed the streets as we started across the plain that led to Redwing's tattered and charred gateway. The numerous unsavory characters kept their weapons trained on the 5 of us as we walked closer, holding their actions as we passed straight through the gate, which, in my mind, served as the point of no return. An enormous hooded stallion statue, with extra-large pink mask, stood in our way as we entered. It moved. The head of the giant pony turned and looked in our direction, making me lock up as fear gripped me. "You? State your name." The deep, powerful voice of a mare emanated from behind the mask. This mare was bigger than any pony I could even imagine. Though Harmony was impressive for a mare, this was just unthinkably large, towering about 10 feet or so from hoof to head. She had to be the product of some wasteland accident, or at the very least some killing joke. I said, "State your name." Backlash. I wasn't sure if I had a good enough job in hiding the fact that I was just a teeny bit intimidated by her side. But when a pony's hoof is the size of your torso, I don't think any pony would blame me. "Not you." She raised her enormous hoof and pointed at me. "You. The pinky in front. Name." I looked back to see she was pointing at Railspike. Shit. How the hell could any pony recognize each other in these outfits? All they had to do was look at me. Quick bash blast. Think fast. Force those gears to turn. I concentrated as hard as I could, and the wheels spat out something inspired by my run of all ponies. That pipsqueak had been a thorn in my side, but maybe now we could save our flanks. It didn't matter how big the pony was. He always talked the same way. "Hey, cunt! Are you deaf? I said my name's Backlash!" She snorted and stomped as she turned herself towards me, taking a single step forward and somehow managing to seem even bigger. I gave a nervous swallow and straightened my stance out. "I'm here for 42. You know, that bitch who runs the place? She's expecting me. So turn your sweet little flank around and go tell her I'm here." "No need for that." The smooth voice of a stallion came from behind her, his voice oddly familiar to one I've hated before. "Go on, Linebreaker. Your break ended 10 minutes ago. Get back to watching the west wall." The enormous mare grunted and lumbered off, leaving me staring at the half-charred form of a familiar pink-coated stallion, whose one brown eye was opposite the one I was missing. "Wait. You assholes again? You're who the boss is looking for?" He smiled, and I couldn't help but wonder if that's what I looked like whenever I did. "Wowie. First you kill Bishop, then you blow up the pool, and nearly yours truly. Now I get to be the one to turn you in? Finally, some fucking justice in my life." I looked around, keeping my gaze anywhere but on his annoyingly contrasted face. Something inside me tugged at my anger when I looked at him, but I couldn't afford to blow it now. I picked up on a surprising notion as I looked about. There were a few raiders in my sight, only 15 or so from where I stood, though there might be double that spread about elsewhere. Now all the bodies made sense, as it looks like the town ponies gave them hell defending the place. I bet Railspike waited just long enough. He could get the jump on them and sweep them clean with ease. All we needed to do was free the town's ponies first. The pink stallion hit his hoof in the snow in excitement. "Oh yeah, the boss wanted me to give you something." He put his hoof in his muzzle and whistled, waiting expectantly while a hooded pony was brought out from the general store. "She knew you'd love this one. This little surprise." I rolled my eyes and looked at the cloaked pony, immediately identifying him. "Hey, Gale. You all right?" Honestly, the least they could have done was cover up his cutie mark if it was going to be a surprise. Though I'm glad they didn't have the foresight, because as long as Gale was all right, there was hope that the others would be as well. Not much of a surprise when you only covered his head. The stallion only snickered at my response. They removed the hood, concealing an almost alien-looking stallion, or stubble-laden stallion who squinted in the evening night. The most distressing addition to him wasn't the dozen or so cuts and bruises to his face, but the blinking explosive collar secured far too tightly around his neck. The open wound that ran around the edge smelled terribly and looked almost green. I started to wonder how long they had kept it secured to him like that. He looked so bad it was almost as if they hadn't given him any food or drink in the last few days. His eyes locked me as he spread his cracked lips into a smile. "They're hidden in plain sight, just like you were. I got them out, and stayed behind Pariah." He was cut off when a sharp crack filled the air, and the ones closest to Gale were splattered with bits of blood and bone. His decapitated body dropped to the ground, and the flames I held inside, specifically for my hatred of 42, flared brighter than it ever had. "Surprise!" the pink stallion declared, smiling brightly as he leaned closer to me. The gears in my mind locked as something primal inside snapped. I tensed up to cue Sats, feeling nothing but the urge to end his life. I thought about beating his skull in as much as possible and executing the spell, thinking I wanted to leave his corpse as mutilated as Gale was. Time crawled forward in the way that Sats does while my hoof swung across the air, catching his smiling face off guard and crumpling his teeth on that side. As his head turned, I threw every ounce of hate through the spell and into my strike that I could, focusing on the idea that I was going to spin his stupid smiling face right off his shoulders. And I did. I watched in fascinated horror as his head continued spinning, even after my hoof disconnected from it, and the skin around his neck warped and tore. Each muscle along it snapped in sequence as it torqued, and finally with a quick jiggle, the rest of his flesh, his spine gave way, so that it separated from his body. In the back of my mind, I could hear 42 laughing at him and calling out for me to kill more. With the target deceased, the spell ended, and I was thrust into normal time again. There was a moment when all was quiet, and even the raiders held their breath. The twisted and broken face of the annoying pink stallion lay on the dirt as his body slumped over at my hooves. One of the raiders loaded their sniper rifle and yelled, "That guy just killed Lucky!" The pinprick-eyed unicorn from the general store ran out, levitating a makeshift spear. "Fuck! He owed me money! You're fucking dead!" In a moment, the raider was forever silenced as one of Railspike's ponies opened fire, and all hell broke loose. 42's ponies came out of the burning woodwork, and the allies I had brought spread out, firing in all directions as I struggled to pull out Heartstopper. If only I hadn't lost my temper, maybe we wouldn't have been in this situation. I finally found the box-shaped shotgun and drew it out, quickly hoofing it into my muzzle as a screaming raider galloped towards me. In an instant, half of his head was missing, and his body tumbled through the snow as my ear rang with Railspike's shotgun blast. I smiled to him before he bolted off to find another target. Likewise, I pressed forward, needing to climb the hill to find the hostages. Gale said they were hidden in plain sight, and I think that meant it was the hilltop shack where Pariah had kept Brass and I. "Come on, you sons of bitches!" I could hear Twain was enjoying this a bit too much as he slowly made his way forward with me. A shadow was pressed overhead as she swooped in and left off, one carefully placed shot after the other, turning each of the ponies in my way into giblets as I walked forward. The sharp, deliberate reports of both Carlotta and Longbow's rifles trailed along with me amidst the chaos as we gathered again and traveled in a group up the street. From the west side of town there was a roar unlike any wasteland monstrosity I've ever heard. Our luck had just turned sour as the giant mare barreled towards us, just barely glancing a house with her body and splintering the wood with a sharp crack. The gears in my head spun to figure out how to bring her down quickly, but I was interrupted when Twain stepped up in front of me. "Oh, I love the fights you bring me to." Twain laughed as the giant mare stopped and stared at us. "You all keep going. I've got a date tonight with one hell of a mare." I didn't care for the timing of his humor, but if he could keep that thing away from us, he could spout horrid one-liners all day. He reached back to the special fed system on his back, and hooked a switch on it to connect all 4 of his ammo boxes to the feed chute. "Yo, she-bitch, let's go!" He let off a few shots at her, dotting her with small red holes that only made the mare howl in anger. He bolted off into the right, heading into one of the half-burned-down houses as the raging mare chased off towards the backside of it. A large blast rocked the wall behind us, and the excited shouting from her amplified voice gave way that at least Frosted Cakes had joined the fighting. "Yeah, that's right. It's boom time now, you..." Her voice was overwritten by the hum of Fruit Cup's 2 miniguns going off, spraying down the line of guards who had managed to defend the wall. Free to continue, we turned around the first bend in the road, climbing the snow-covered street as the battle raged below. A few members of 42's gang that poked their head out made sure to duck back out of sight before we could get a shot lined up. The sharp feedback of the PA system filled the air, and everyone groaned. "Wow, Backlash! Just wow! Here I was, watching you in the closed circuit as he antagonized you, and BAM! You knocked his head clean off!" 42 clapped her hooves slowly, laughing to herself from her comfy position in what I figured to be the orchard. "That was some top-tier execution of Pie family impossibility. You really learned how to channel that family line right through your hooves. You know what? I'm proud of you." She sniffled with feigned joy. "The ones we teach always grow up so fast." I pressed on the others and tried not to listen to what she was saying, but found myself hanging on her every word. My hatred for her was so strong already that I couldn't pass up a chance to let her words fuel it even more. "So yeah, as you might have heard, I kinda lost your first gift when that stallion let them all escape. Sorry about that. Had this whole plan to scar you for life with their remains again, but honestly, I'm glad it didn't work out. The joke was getting old anyway. A stallion burst out of one of the burning houses to my right, smashing into me and dragging me into the dirt. 42 continued to talk as I wrestled with him, finding myself in a losing battle as he flicked a butcher's knife at me from his muzzle. "You like the storm outside? I thought it was a pretty nifty idea, and I have no idea why they wouldn't have kept such an awesome project. I mean, yeah, the shield spells they went with were ultimately easier to implement, but a Wendigo augmented shield protection spell? Doesn't get much more awesome than that. Even though I'm pretty sure the enchantment will break soon. It wins hooves down just by the cool factor. Get it? Yeah, fuck you too, Backlash. You're probably too busy fighting for your life to even listen to this crazy ant anymore." I was doing my best job at keeping my head and neck away from the jagged blade as we rolled through the snow. I torqued myself wrong, and the stronger stallion pinned me down, standing on me with his arching neck to strike just before Colada shot a pair of rounds right through it. He stiffened and dropped to the side of me, twitching as I picked myself up. There was a crack like thunder that erupted from higher on the mountain, and the storm clouds above gradually started to slow down. "Well, look at that. Enchantment dead. You know, that's probably why they didn't use it after all. Oh well." Was she going to talk the entire walk up, or was it just her plan to get me so angry that I blindly charged at her? If so, it's working. "I almost forgot. It's monologue time." 42 cleared her throat and paused for a moment. "Look around you, Backlash. This is the wasteland of your design, filled with pain and suffering, so perfect. The drums of my empire are on the horizon. Can't you hear them? With my leadership, the strong and the waste will cleanse this place, and a new era, my era, will be written in Equian history, one in which the weak will serve to make their goddess on earth pleased, sacrificing all that they are in my name." Saying it was one thing, but I knew that as comic bookish as it sounded, she could do it if she wanted. I picked up the pace with her every word, the rage inside me boiling and spreading throughout my body. There was a click that could be heard over the PA system, and the muffled sounds of the patriotic marching band was being transmitted inside 42's voice. "Those who follow willingly will be rewarded. Those who fight will be heralded as heroes for their valiant and misguided efforts. You are the first of these, Backlash. I shall construct entire monuments to your failure, and every pony will know the name of my greatest vanquished enemy. You will be my impossible standard, the pony to which no other could compare. You will be the face they will look to when they need someone to blame for the dark and terrifying reality I will force upon them in the coming days." I picked up the speed, trotting as I reached the second turn, not deterred by the increasing amount of the incline, or the fact that there were 3 red blips on my compass waiting for me up ahead. The music stopped with another click, and 42 came back over the system with a sigh. I had pushed my gate into a corner, surprising the first of her minions to emerge. He stepped out too far, and I threw my shoulder to him, sending him to the ground as the rage inside me finally found an outlet. I reared up and focused all the weight onto my forehooves and brought them down. The sickening snap of his skull pushed the rest of the world further back. "By the way, Backlash, you should thank your Steel Ranger friends for the door knocker. It was really super kind of them to convert it to alcohol and leave it here when they fled. Maybe I'll use it to knock at the front of 10 Pony next." "Yeah, that sounds like fun." My friends were calling out for me as the other 2 ponies showed themselves. A pair of earth ponies with power hooves stood between me and 42. It was that simple. I charged them, watching their hooves as I got closer. My tail felt like it had been caught on something, and I instinctively ducked low, avoiding the high swing the first pony gave. I used my momentum to slam into him, skidding to a stop as he tumbled away. Without hesitation, I aimed and kicked out my rear hooves, connecting with the second pony's side and causing several of his ribs to snap. I enjoyed the feeling resonating through my legs. With the threats taken care of for now, and the rest of the world seemed fuzzy and unimportant, I burst immediately into a gallop. Intentional or not, I wasn't going to slow down. I wasn't going to slow down until I tore 42 to pieces with my bare hooves. I flew up this hill, the blood in my veins boiling over as I zipped past Pariah's cabin, pointing myself at the rocky path towards the orchard door. I knew my friends were shouting to me, but I couldn't hear them anymore. One thought was overpowering everything else, and nothing was going to stop me now. The orchard cave entrance had been blasted open, and large boulders lay strewn about it on the hillside. I was so close to vengeance, so close to ending this, that my very soul ebbed with anticipation. I hopped over the lip of the cave and dashed forward again, only to feel something grab my hoof and pull me to the ground. Hard. I blacked out for half a second, as I tumbled and rolled across the ground, coming to a rest facing the exit as my whole body took a moment to reorientate itself, before telling me how much that hurt. A quick snap and a spark from the entrance caught my attention, pulling it to a heap of gray metal scraps. The gears in my head worked to rebuild whatever lay before me, quickly reconstructing the towering form of a robot. One that I knew. "Pink! Bit? Are you alive?" I groaned out, shaking my head as I got to my hooves. The anger I felt was drifting away, becoming unimportant as I looked at the remainder of the pre-war marvel. The frantic sound of my friends filled my ears as they climbed the rocks after me, quickly catching up and falling silent as I just stared and waited for a response. "Hey, Chief. Nice to see you." The sad-sounding voice of Pink came over the speaker that was buried in the pile. The light that normally sat in the main hull flickered on a dim pink. "Bit's here as well, though she's feeling a bit under the weather. How goes the good fight?" It's almost done," I stammered, not wanting to waste any more of the time that might have left for me to help them. "Tell me how to fix you." I refused to let any more friends go today. The ones who'd already been taken from me were toll enough to end 42. "Sorry, Chief. One of their shots got the repair talisman, and we're bleeding power fairly quickly. We only have a few minutes left." She sounded oddly at peace with dying, but I couldn't stand to see it. "It's all right. We've had long lives." "Take mine!" Longbow quickly walked up, her horn glowing and removing her flank plate. "After a day, I won't need this armor, but you can still use my talisman to do good for others." She levitated the old, tarnished talisman from her armor, spinning it in front of her muzzle. "It belonged to some pony I respected very much, so you need to respect it the same way. All right?" Giving it up hurt her almost as much as when I gave it to her, but I think she saw it as a way to finally move on from Lemon. "We will. Thank you, Paladin Longbow." A plate on Edie's lid slid out of place, and the shattered pieces of the previous gem were pushed forward, out of the socket, and made way for the new one. Longbow gently set Lemon's talisman in the receptacle, and watched it as it slowly was brought into place. Almost immediately, the sparking wires on the pile glowed a faint aura and snapped back together, closing and severing connections between each pile as Edie started to rebuild itself. Energy level stabilizing. Generator output increasing. Estimated reconstruction time is 22 minutes and 28 seconds. 40 seconds. Wait a minute. How is it going up? Sorry, Chief, but I think we're going to miss the party on account of an annoyingly slow OS. Longbow chuckled at that. Don't worry. I'm just glad you're all right. Her magic connected her armor together again, sealing it with a whine as she added her helmet. If you two girls would excuse us, we have a mare to kill. Oh, quickly, Backlash. I wanted to tell you, another one of our sisters is in this orchard. If you can, just tell her that we're still alive. One of the piles fell over and slowly began untwisting itself. Wait, how many different kinds of facilities have one of you gals in it? I scratched at my mane and thought about it. Could there really be that many? I've scoured plenty of old military bases and warehouses without seeing anything more advanced than a Protect-A-Pony. They only made it with the purpose of overseeing an orchard, silly. And there were only 7 orchards built across Equestria, so you're lucky to have visited even 3 of them. She stated with a joyful, matter-of-fact way. But I still had to question that the 3 were. There was the East Orchard facility under Philly, and there was the Orchard 7 in Red Wing. Bit was in charge of dangerous artifact storage, and I maintained the MOM entry, Central Armory, and the whole of the Pony of Interest Preservation Bank, home to only one occupant, despite its misleading name. So, the bunker I found you in was an orchard. I sat down as I tried to process it. But there was no giant door. It's at the bottom. Duh. Pink replied with a note of playful haughtiness. Great. Just what I needed today was to be sassed at by a 10-foot robot. It was disturbing news, though. There were 4 other orchards past these, and so far each one has been chock full of dangerous weapons, just threatening to annihilate the rest of the wasteland. Here I was, just ready to hoof it over to the Steel Rangers like it was nothing. What if they found the other locations through this one? How much damage could be done by one of them accidentally releasing another pony like 42? I was pulled from my thoughts as the light on the hull glowed a bright pink, suddenly blinking out and shifting to purple. Hello again, Chief. Bit here. Can you also ask the AP if she can forward copies of her research results to all the other servers? The fact that the other APs are still alive means that there's experiments to run and research to be done. Wow. She sounded a bit too happy to work on things. But she's modeled after Twilight Sparkle, I think. I can't let that happen, Bit. I'm sorry. If there's any chance that the info could be sent to the other, could cause another 42 incident, I can't risk it. The war is over now, and the research needs to be dead, along with the old world. My harsh but necessary words made the purple light dim slightly. That's fine, I guess. Bit sounded more distraught than I might have imagined. I'll just find something else to do with my time, completely ignoring my entire reason for existing. She let out a heavy sigh amid from the speakers. The gears in my head sped another idea. Fine. I rolled my eyes and tapped my hoof to the ground. I'll see if I can get her to release anything having to do with medical research. Projects from there can only help ponies out. Right? The light on the hull brightened immensely. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you! She sounded like that would be more than enough to keep her content for a while. Backlash! The amplified voice of Maple called out from over the hill. He crested over the top to the entrance, trilling fruit cup and frosted cakes as the 3 of them looked no real worse for wear. We found the civilians had taken shelter in the cave just down the hill. Their leader tells me that he doesn't need our help. So I came here to ask if you require any assistance from us. I blinked, not even realizing that I had ran past them in my anger. I shook my head as I mentally kicked myself. No, you 3 get them somewhere safe. Even if Pariah doesn't think he needs your help. If this ends badly, at the very least you'll have a head start. Maple nodded. I wanted to say thank you. His voice was honest, but his eyes told me that he was ashamed. I don't think I can ever forgive you for getting my son killed, but I can see why he looked up to you as a friend. I wanted to thank you for showing me that I should have been a better father, and at least now I can try to be a better ranger. See you soon, Backlash! Frosted Cake saluted as Maple turned and walked down the hill, looking over to Fruit Cup. Hey, he spoke up and looked at me. You take care of Longbow in there. You bring her back in one piece. He jabbed his hoof at me, hesitation and fear bleeding from his words. That, and kick that bitch's flank all the way to the moon. If you'll get those folks to safety. I smirked and mimicked the jabs. He nodded and pushed himself off, spinning and disappearing back down the slopes. I cut my hooves to yell at him. Don't worry. This shouldn't take too long anyway. There was a crackle of static from across the room that startled me, making me look back over the rest of the cavern. Sitting beside a can at the top, the crushed remains of the old military portable, sat a caterpillar-tracked pile driver, its heavy ram looking warped and smashed at the end. I looked over to where the weathered door once stood, the heavy steel cog looking out of place in the stark white of a small room. The now curved slab of metal lay just short of a teleportation pad, which seemed to be the source of the sound. It crackled again before 42's voice came from the room. "Crusaders! Come out and play!" I tensed up instinctively, grinding my teeth as she repeated herself. "Crusaders! Come out and play!" My rage bubbled up again as I took a step towards the room, but the flutter of wings filled my ears as Skyline dropped down in front of me. "We go together." Her voice helped me to fight my body, letting me relax as I focused on her words. Carlotta and Longbow advanced towards the room, and I waited for Skyline to turn before moving a hoof. As we climbed over the door and stood on the pad, I hooked at the big yellow button that activated the transport and waited. Nothing. I looked down at the control panel that held the button, finding a small round button sat below what looked like a speaker that I had missed when I looked before. I hoofed it down. "Hello?" I waited for a moment before taking my hoof off of it again. I glanced at the others with a shrug and hoofed the transportation button sharply. I waited for the air to heat up and the whining to start, but it never came. I was about to hit the button again when a fairly shrill-voiced mare came over the intercom. "This is Dash, the administrator of the facility. I've locked this pad until you can identify yourselves. You aren't secret spies, are you?" "We're not spies. My name is Backlash, here from the Ministry of Morale. My friends and I need access to the facility." I unclicked the button and rolled my eyes. Great. Now we have to go through the whole song and dance about me being the chief of the MOM. There was a click from under the pad and the normal transport process began, building up to the flash that whisked us away. As the light bled off, I noticed a set of dark lines running from the floor to the roof, and as I blinked a few times, they refocused into bars. What the fuck? I looked around, finding that each one of us had been stripped of our gear and placed in separate cages. A light whirling sound, accompanying a small blue sphere as it slid through the wall along a track in the ceiling. It stopped with a click as the bar holding it dropped down and articulated around. A pair of rose-colored eyes projected across the ball's equator. They looked angry. "Trying to sneak in under false credentials, eh? Not under my watch." The small blue ball split along the middle as she talked, opening and shutting like a mouth, while looking across us with a gaze that was incredibly sincere for a machine. "You should all be ashamed of yourselves for even trying to sneak in here. Especially you, mister." She spun herself around and glared at me. "What possessed you to sneak in here when it's your Aunt Pinkie Pie's first visit here in 124 years? "What? She's not Pinkie. She's an imposter." I shouted and stepped forward, pressing my hooves against the bar. "You have to believe me. Check your records for a Subject 42. The moment I said that, the gears in my head reminded me of the potential problem with that task. Other project files went up with each orchard. Maybe she could still get them on my pip-buck. "Here. The information is on here." I held my hoof out. "Sorry, but accessing systems that haven't been cleared is a security risk. Besides, she's got a DNA match that's on file, 96%. That's well within acceptable parameters." Her eyes looked up to the ceiling and squinted as if in thought. "Though, it is protocol to run a check for update files on any ministry-related requests, and for some reason, they didn't tell me the detainees couldn't make the request. So why not?" Her eyes disappeared for a moment, displaying lines of text not unlike the ones on my pip-buck sometimes. "The log from Orchard 4 confirms that you are placed in charge of MOM under temporary wartime suspension rules. It also has on file that a mare from the cryostasis level of the facility attempted the murder of the acting head before leaving the facility, which corroborates your story. On top of that, her DNA is an exact match to the one given to me by the mare claiming to be Pinkie. I apologize for not recognizing you earlier, Chief. What can I do for you?" "All right. Dash, was it?" I gave her a smile as she blinked, and the rose eyes came back. "How about letting my friends and I out first?" I had barely finished the sentence when there was a loud clang and the bars around us descended into the floor. The eyes on the sphere flickered to a look of happiness that, even as just a projection, held depth and emotion. This reminded me of what I had briefly forgotten. She wasn't just a computer, but an intellectual being. I'm Dash, the database for advanced secured holdings. I was commissioned and constructed by the OIA, along with a facility, to hold the most advanced weapon designs and project information available to Equestria, to help them utilize them in the ongoing defense for Equestria. In other words, I could help make all the completely awesome stuff for the war. She bobbed around on her track happily. Well, it didn't help, seeing as the war ended. Carlotta scoffed as her and Longbow came over to me, seemingly entranced by the talking pair of eyes. I have to admit, Dash was such an oddity, I couldn't help but stare either. Oh no! A look of horror accompanied the eyes, and I couldn't tell if that was actually news to the computer. It paused, and looked back at Carlotta expectantly. Wait, did we win? No, everyone lost. Skyline spoke up as she walked to the ball curiously. If this orchard is anything like the one in Philly, do you have any robots that you can go after 42? Skyline looked at me with a smirk. I just wanted to reach out and give her the tightest hug I could. The shrill sound of the PA system coming online again sounded worse than Carlotta's claws along a skycar. That would be nice, thought Skyline. But I have diplomatic immunity. 42 was listening the whole time? By the way, Backlash, I've been listening the whole time. So good luck trying to get a jump on me. Before I forget as well, I'm still waiting to give you your other gifts. That is, if you want to come claim them. She's right, you know. My failsafe code makes it pretty much impossible to target her, seeing as she's related to former Chief Pinkie Pie. It's the same with you, and the unicorn next to you. She looked softly down at Longbow, giving her a look of sincere admiration. Congratulations on the foals, by the way, Miss Backlash. Foals? As in, more than one? Longbow was quick to speak, while my brain had been stuck on a loop for the last few seconds. How do you know? I have to do a medical scan with every transport of organic tissue, and your report came back as twins. Dash's eyes darted around nervously. I totally thought you knew. Sorry about ruining the surprise, Miss B. The intercom cut in, and as 42 always has, she ruined the moment. You know what would be a real surprise? You all actually getting here! She let out a sigh and leaned back in whatever squeaky chair she occupied. So boring just waiting. Let's get the shooting and killing already! Is it really too much to ask? The crackle of the intercom cut off, while the spike of pain shot through my head as the telltale sign of a coming headache. But in her words I heard something surprising. It was that frustration again, the same that I'd heard after the bridge, though now it seemed worse. Dash, can you lock her out of the system and keep her from hearing us? I looked up to her as she, in return, looked to the ceiling, her eyes disappearing and were replaced with a scrolling code once again. And can you locate the machine that I'm pretty sure she's been working on? I need to get there as quickly as possible. Done and done. Dash's eyes reappeared again, as well as a light flickering along the floor as a yellow line shot out of it, stopping at the door. I know. I am awesome. No need to thank me. Just one more thing before you go. A loud zap preceded the return of our liberated equipment onto the floor of our cells. Now, because you're a real pony, you are not restricted by the personnel hostility ban. But lucky for you, I have to recite this super boring disclaimer about how violence in the workplace is wrong. So if you want, just tell me when you're ready to go and I'll play some fun travel music for you over myself so you don't have to hear it. Is that cool with you? That would be nice. Though I don't like how you called me a real pony. I spoke as I felt Longbow's magic secure my saddlebags, watching as Dash actually displayed shame on the notion that she was a computer. Out there, just 50 feet or so from your door, is a couple of good friends, and you may even know them. Do Pink and Bit ring any bells? Shocked, she looked up and angled herself closer to me. Yes. How did they get outside? She looked like she wore was a new one, and it made me smile with every second she wore it. It was hope. They built a machine to carry themselves. I sat down and hooved at my pip-buck, checking that I still had everything in my inventory as the others got geared up. I wasn't sure what to think of them at first, but you know what? They're as real as you and me. Yeah, we may not have the same type of bodies, but that didn't stop them from becoming my friends. So, it shouldn't stop you. Thanks, Chief. It means a lot to have you hear that. She looked at me with pride as she panned across the group of us. Looks like you're ready. Shall we get going? Yes, Dash. I held out my hoof towards the door, looking down the hallway as the yellow line shot ahead, and took a sharp right. Lead on. Actually, Longbow waved her hoof and spoke up. While we walk, I wanted to go over a plan with all of you. Longbow looked to me with a soft gaze, her eyes betraying the fear she had about the coming fight. I was scared too, but there was little Fortitude could do to keep me from trying to protect her. Longbow swung her gaze to the others and headed for the door. Just stay close as we walk. I don't want any chance of Fortitude hearing. We all nodded and walked out the door with her, following along the line, while Dash was true to her word and played some song worthy of an adventure.